Today, we are going to talk about something that will help us to have variety in our writing and to avoid the most common writing mistakes, like sentence run-ons. Before we talk about that, however, let's review very quickly the difference between an independent and a dependent clause. An independent clause is a clause, meaning it has a subject and a verb, that is, think about the word independent, a clause that can stand on its own. It is a complete thought. For example, I walk to the store. Here's our subject and our verb, and it is a complete thought. A dependent clause is a clause, meaning it has a subject and a verb, that can't stand alone. Think of the word dependent. A dependent clause depends on something else to make it a complete, finished thought. A dependent clause, remember, starts with a subordinating conjunction. Think to our acronym AWOOBIS. For example, if I walk to the store. Can you hear how it's incomplete? If I walk to the store, then what? Here's our subject, here's our verb, but it's a dependent clause because it begins with a subordinating conjunction. Now, to finish this sentence so that it's a complete thought, again, it depends on something else. What does it depend on? An independent clause. If I walk to the store, then what? If I walk to the store, I will buy milk. Now that we remember the difference between our independent and dependent clause, let's talk about how to combine them correctly so that we don't make any mistakes. The first way that we can combine an independent clause with a dependent clause is shown exactly like it is here. This combination we're going to write as DC, comma, IC. So for example, if I walk to the store, comma, I'll buy milk. It's very important when you are combining a dependent clause with an independent clause to make sure that you have the comma in the right place. A good way to remember where the comma goes in this combination is just to say this out loud. Pay attention to where you naturally pause. Say this sentence out loud to yourself. Did you notice how you naturally paused after the word store? Remember, whenever you're writing a DC, comma, IC combination, to include the comma after the dependent clause. The next way that we can combine an independent clause to a dependent clause is just to flip this around and omit the comma. This clause combination is written like IC, DC. So our independent clause comes first, I'll buy milk, if I go to the store. Leave out the comma when you have the dependent clause first. Okay, now how do we combine two independent clauses properly? The first way is going to be written like this. Independent clause, comma, coordinating conjunction, independent clause. Now think back to coordinating conjunction, which we've already learned. Think of the word coordinating. So a conjunction joins two things. What a coordinating conjunction does is join two independent clauses. If you can remember, think of the acronym that we talked about for a coordinating conjunction. The acronym is FANBOYS. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. If we were to write this sentence in this clause, we would write, I'll buy milk, for I'll go to the store. Or a better way to write it might be, I'll go to the store and I'll buy milk. Now be careful. Now that we know this clause combination, I see, comma, coordinating conjunction, I see, you might be tempted to write a comma every time you see one of these fanboy words or these coordinating conjunctions. Remember, you only have a comma before the coordinating conjunction if what's after is an independent clause in this combination. If we were to write, I'll go to the store, I'll go to the store and buy milk. Now let's break apart this sentence. I'll go to the store. Does that sound like an independent or a dependent clause? Independent clause. Now let's look at the second part of our sentence. Buy milk. Does that look like an independent clause? We're missing the subject, so we leave out the comma there. Now our last clause combination is my favorite because it's the simplest. It is simply I see, semicolon, I see. I go to the store, semicolon, I buy milk. A semicolon is similar to a period because it separates two independent clauses. However, the difference between a semicolon and a period in this case is that it creates a little bit stronger of a bond than a period. Both clauses on either side of the semicolon need to be connected in some way. Okay, now to the exciting part. If you remember nothing else that Ms. Christensen teaches you, remember that this, I see, comma, I see, is never, ever, 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 ever a correct way to combine two independent clauses. This is what we call a sentence run-on. Now that you know 4 ways to correctly combine independent and dependent clauses, you will avoid ever writing a sentence run-on.